Welcome back. The second topic that we are going to look at is root cause analysis. Remember that in the previous lecture we talked about the overview of the WHO ICPS conceptual framework on patient safety and how to report of an incident that may compromise patient safety. And we have looked at 9 different types of information that should be sought for when an untoward incident occurred. That's according to the WHO ICPS framework. And we have said that we shall look at root cause analysis in order to determine the contributing factors of an incident. So the objectives of this lecture are that the learners should be able to apply the Ishikawa's fishbone diagram and the 5 whys approach for root cause analysis in order to find out the contributing factors of an incident. Number 2 is to describe 3 different ways. I'm going to share 3 different ways for thematic groupings of causes in a fishbone diagram. Number 3 is to describe the importance of having good patient safety culture in order to reduce untoward incidents. This is the basic structure of an Ishikawa fishbone diagram, and we can see that basically the Ishikawa's fishbone diagram is a graphical representation used for structured brainstorming for identification of contributing factors. With the central line, this central line here, or the spine, representing the incidence or the key metric of interest, and the ribs, or this ribs here that is spreading out from the spine, representing the various groups of causes. Now there are many ways of grouping of the various causes. One thematic grouping of causes is through the use of the generic 7 M's. It is generic because the 7 M's approach is also used in other disciplines such as in engineering and aviation industries. These 7 M's are the cause due to manpower or man, and that includes the lack of staff, the lack of manpower, etc. The second M is machines, and that refers to equipment failures. Number 3 is the third M refers to methods. This refers to all the procedural issues. Even in the previous lecture we'll talk about that. Number 4, the fourth M refers to materials, and these include in our specific cases in a clinical incident would, for example, materials here would refers to medications, for examples, medication errors. Number 5 would refers to measurements, wrong measurement in this specific case, for example, wrong lab results, inadequate lab results or inadequate x-rays, etc. The 6th M is money, and this refers to all the financial constraints. The 7th M is milieu, or also known as environment, and this refers to, in a specific clinical setting, would be those busy, stressful wards. The second way, or the second thematic grouping of causes that we can use in a fishbone diagram is the London Protocol of System Analysis of Clinical Incidents, the London Protocols. The London Protocol groups the contributing factors or the contributing causes as patient factors, staff factors, task and technology factors, team factors, work environment factors, organizational and management factors, as well as X factors. Now let's look at the London protocols in more details now. For patient factors, these include the clinical condition of the patient, for example, the complexity of his or her disease process and the severity of the patient's illness, potential language and communication barrier, very important. Number 3 is the personality and the social factors of the patients that may contribute to an untoward incident. Second is the staff factors, and this include the competency of the staff or the doctors, the nurses, paramedics, of knowledge and skills, even attitudes. Second is the staff's compliance to existing protocols, existing rules and regulations, either intentionally or unintentional violation or non-compliance of all the policies, protocols, guidelines. It also has to do, or perhaps it may have to do with the personality of the staff themselves, whether some of the staff may not be able to communicate well with the patients. Third group of factors is the task or technology factors. This include the complexity of the task and whether the staff, the complexity of the task and whether the staff is equipped or skilled enough to handle or to perform the task. Task complexity also refers to, or also could be due to how the task is being designed and the ease of execution of the task. There may also be incidents of technological failures, as well as even whether there's any availability of protocols, guidelines, decision-making aids that may help the staff to make decisions. The fourth group of factors in the London Protocols refers to team factors or teamwork factors, and these include communication, verbal and written communication among the various staff or various hierarchy of staff in a team. There may also be issues related to supervision or the adequate or inadequate supervision and availability of help to the junior staff, for example. We should also consider the team structures, whether there is consistency in the team structure or there is too much mobility or moving around or reshuffling of the staff in a team. Support system, leadership are included as well. The fourth group of factors refers to the work environment factors, and this include whether the work environment is stressful because of the lack of staff, increased patient load, on-calls, too many on-calls, lack of doctors, long working hours, doctors having to work double shift, for example, and the ergonomics of the work environment as well, the lightings, the spaces, etc. Then the next group of factors is refers to the organizational and the management factors. This refers to the adequacy of financial resource or financial constraints in an organization, and therefore may result in the lack of certain medications, certain reagents to perform some form of laboratory tests. Organizational structures as well, whether the top management is creating a conducive environment for the staff who are working under them. We should also look at the availability on the adequacy of policy, standards, guidelines, goals, as well as whether the organization actually put an adequate emphasis on safety cultures and priority safety, patient safety as objective. The third group of thematic, or the third ways for thematic groupings is according to the 7 groups of ways or muda. In a lean management, ways or muda is a very common topic. If ways or redundancy is an important concern here, then this will serve as a very good groupings. According to the lean management, there are 7 groups of ways, and these include too much transportation, unnecessary redundant transportation of the patient, for example, moving the patient from one end to another, for example, moving the patient to x-rays and moving him back to the ward, and then moving him back again to the x-rays department. Second would be the inventory, unnecessary inventories, motions, waiting, too much waiting time, over processing of information, over productions, unnecessary productions, and any defects in the management. And specifically in the context of patient safety, as mentioned, transport would refer here the unnecessary transporting of the patient, transferring of the patients. Inventories would include excesses, unnecessary clerical works, too much of paperwork. Motions would include unnecessary waiting for investigation results, when the patient could have been admitted to the wards rather than waiting in the emergency department, for example. Then we have prolonged waiting for referrals, over processing, redundant repeats of blood works. And another one very common is redundant repeats of x-ray films, overproduction, as mentioned, repeat x-rays for patients referred from another hospitals, and defects, diagnostic errors, procedural failures, and so on and so forth. So I would encourage the learners to look up on these 7 groups of ways in any lean management learning. The second way for root cause analysis is through the use of the 5 whys approach. In fact, the 5 whys approach and the Ishikawa fishbone diagram can be combined. The 5 whys approach is basically an approach where we iteratively or repeatedly ask the questions why, in order to dive deep into the narrative of an incident, in order to allow us to try to identify the root cause of problems. Well, we should also note that it is not enough just to have a good framework. It's not enough just to know about the WHO conceptual framework for International Classification of Patient Safety, ICPS, and it's also not enough even if we are familiar with the 2 ways of doing root cause analysis and the many different thematic groupings. Is not enough. What is more important is actually to establish a good patient safety culture. Having a good patient safety culture may reduce the risk of incidents that compromises patient safety. What is patient safety culture? A patient safety culture is a culture that exhibits these 5, as listed here, these 5 high-level attributes that all healthcare professionals should strive to operationalize through the implementation of strong safety management systems. And these 5 attributes are a culture where all healthcare professionals, include the frontline staff, physicians, administrators, accept responsibility. for their own safety, for the safety of themselves, their co-workers, their patients, and even the family members and visitors. Each and every one of the staff of the healthcare workers, healthcare staff, has the responsibility, right from the top down to those who are working under the top management. The second one is a culture that prioritizes safety above financial and operational goals, and this can be quite an ideal, but at any one point we should always strive to have this culture prioritizing safety above financial and operational goals. The third one refers to a culture that encourages and rewards the identification, the communications, and resolution of safety issues. We should encourage staff to identify, to speak it up. Number 4 is a culture that provides for organizational learnings from these incidents. There should always be an opportunity to learn from our mistakes. And number 5 is a culture that provides appropriate resources, structure, and accountability to maintain effective safety systems. And we can see that having a good patient safety culture is so essential, and it should begin from the top down. So that's all for this lecture, and I shall see you again in the next lecture. Thank you very much.